Aloha, welcome everyone. Welcome to this conversation that is being brought to you by the Spark M. Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, the William S. Richardson School of Law, and the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series. Hawaii has one of the highest rates of houselessness, as most of you likely know, in the United States. And Hawaii also has powerful solutions that are grounded in community and culture, in Aina. In recent months, I have been so grateful to join today's panelists, James, and other Hui Aloha leaders, Kathy, Alani, Lindsay, to work with houseless individuals who do beach, park, and bathroom cleanup in Waianae and Waimanalo in Sand Island. And by hearing the difficult and powerful stories of what has brought people to live on the streets or in the park, I have learned more about life's troubles, but I've also learned a lot about the possibilities of new growth, of connection, even after much has been lost. I've been educated on the fact that no one is homeless, especially here in Hawaii. Even those of us who have no house have a strong connection to community, to place, and to beloved others that all sort of constitutes home. Moreover, the lack of a house is certainly not what defines houseless individuals. I have met so many interesting people with wisdom, deep faith, broad perspective, enormous skill, and great imagination. They have really rich and varied stories, some children, parents, activists, athletes. And these individuals often experience disrespect as well as invisibility or neglect, and resources are wasted very often on criminalization of the houses instead of building community and supporting villages. And so today's panelists remind us that we can be looking to the unhoused as resources to help us understand humanity, community. Because houselessness is a complex phenomenon, it can't be understood in simplistic ways or with blanket statements or with a one-size-fits-all approach. So the solutions we need are multifaceted and layered and need to be preceded, as I have been taught, with careful listening and respectful, open-minded conversation. Today, I'm really excited that you will be hearing from these solutionaries, leaders, advocates from our island's houseless and activist communities to help develop our collective understanding. Please note that this event is streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you are joining us in the Zoom webinar, you can post comments and questions using the Q&A tool. Please do let us know where you are coming from and if you have questions. And if you're watching through social media, you can post questions there as well. The video will also be posted on Facebook and YouTube after the event. Our question will last, our conversation rather, will last about an hour and a half, and we will end promptly at 4:30. So first, I would like to welcome James Koshiba. In 2015, James was frustrated by the limited compassion for those on the streets. He spent some time in a large urban encampment and forged relationships with people who were experiencing houselessness. And he later became a supporter and student of Pu'uhonua o Waianae, which is a self-organized village of 250 people living unhoused right now at the Waianae Boat Harbor, but there's also a Mauka site. You will be hearing about it from Twinkle soon. But through these relationships, James began to understand houselessness as a problem of broken connections with community, and he founded Hui Aloha with others to demonstrate how rebuilding community with those who are marginalized is key to solving social problems like houselessness. And today, Hui Aloha partners with people on the street to launch service projects in communities, reconnecting them with housed neighbors and helping the housed and unhoused people find healing and purpose together. Welcome, James. Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo, Maya.
Thank you. So first, James, can you offer us a little bit of context about perhaps how we have come to this place, and if you can speak a little bit about how the allocation of resources and the ways in which people have tried to address houselessness, what has been effective and what has been ineffective, and where are we now?
Well, I think you started your introduction with that word frustration, and I think it is in many ways kind of still a frustrating space. I personally started to get interested in homelessness or houselessness when I first moved home from the continent after school. This was the early 2000s. And I grew up, in Hawaii, where you wouldn't see very many people on the street. And all of a sudden, around 2005, there was an explosion of people on beaches, in parks, on sidewalks. And as you said, shocking and frustrating. And then as the policy solutions started to tilt more and more toward criminalizing being homeless, the frustration took on a new level. And so where are we today? And I think the data shows we aren't that different than we were a decade ago. We still have among the highest rates of houselessness in the country. We have a lot of people working really hard in a system of social services and homeless services provision, but that system's struggling. And I think you asked about kind of what's working or resource allocation. And I think the current system really misses two parts of the problem. The first is it ignores the economic reality that there's just in a market-based system of housing and land, there is no space for many of our people. If you have any kind of challenge in your life that limits your income and earning potential, whether that's a physical disability, a mental health challenge, an addiction, a past incarceration, limited education, or just experiencing a life crisis, a tough time in your life, there's no space for you. There's too little space that people can actually afford. And so, with that reality as the backdrop, our system of homeless services, outreach, and provision focuses on quickly pushing people into shelter as a first step to what is supposed to be a path toward permanent housing or bringing people home. But you can't do that and ignore the bigger picture that there is no housing at the end of that. We are pushing people into a dead end or a revolving door. So that's what's happened to a lot of the people who have attempted to use the shelter system is, most folks, including myself, before I started to build these relationships, didn't realize that shelters have time limits. You have about 90 days. And if you haven't found permanent housing at the end of that, you might be discharged from a shelter back out onto the street. Most people on the street today have been through a shelter at least once, and probably more than one shelter more than one time. So dead end or revolving door. Shelters also have rules that don't always make sense, and it's not the fault of the shelter. The shelters are under-resourced and understaffed. And so when you have 3 people trying to manage, a shelter of 90 folks, naturally you start to pile on more and more rules and to manage in a more and more draconian way because you're outnumbered. And so shelters can feel like prison and very confining. And I think, along with that, sort of pushing people into these spaces that don't have a sustainable home at the end of it and keeping everything temporary, there's no space or time to build trust and relationships and a loving community, which is kind of the third ingredient that I think is probably the most fundamental ingredient that any of us need to make any progress in our lives. So it was with those kind of gaps in the system, and especially that last one, the need for loving relationships and a sense of community in mind that a group of us started Hui Aloha. And Hui Aloha is just a network of volunteers. And we were looking for a different way to approach houselessness and community problems in general. One that would rely more on rebuilding a sense of community and building that trust and relationships. And as you said, I really learned that by being a student of Twinkle and Pu'uhonua o Waianae. I started spending time out there with Twinkle 6 years ago, built those relationships. And what I saw was a really remarkable community in action that just by the virtue of building that sense of loving community was helping people grow and heal and advance their lives in ways that our system was unable to. So the volunteers of Hui Aloha try to take the lessons of Pu'uhonua o Waianae and reach out to other communities, other houseless encampments, and see whether those lessons can be used to benefit people in other spaces. So we work in Waianae, we work in Waimanalo at Waimanalo Beach Park, and we were working in Kaka'ako until people were pushed out of that area, and many of those folks ended up on Sand Island. So we now have kind of a hub at Sand Island too. But the way we went about trying to build those relationships was we just take a coffee traveler and some pastries, and we go and consistently weekend after weekend just go tent to tent and meet people and get to know them. And what we're looking for, again, following the Pu'uhonua model, was people in an encampment who are willing to do something positive, who wanted to do something positive for their neighborhood, for their community. And in every encampment you go to, there's somebody like that, often more than one, someone who's cleaning the park, or you mentioned taking care of the bathroom, or the person who's the resource person in their encampment for everybody else around them, who knows how to access services or which pantries are open on what day. And we found those people and we said, how can we support you? How can we partner with you to get the good thing you have going to spread and impact more people? And what that evolved into over time was, for example, in both Kaka'ako and Waimanalo, folks in those encampments started to band together, organize themselves, and started to turn out every week to do cleanups, first of their park. And then after a while, their park was so clean that they started to branch out to other areas. So the folks in Waimanalo are a good example. Starting late 2018, early 2019, they started to expand their beach park cleanup to include an area just down the coast from where they live called Mulivai Olena. It's an area of environmental and cultural importance, and a nonprofit group called 808 Cleanups is kind of the caretaker of that space. But folks from the encampment have taken on the kuleana for helping to pull out invasive species, to clear that area and prepare it for school kids who use it to learn about the environment and Native Hawaiian culture. So they've had a weekly service project that's focused on that going back, a couple of years now. Similarly, in Kaka'ako, people started to clean their park first and then expand it out from there. And I think Lindsay will probably share more about that. But that service project turned into a wide-ranging cleanup that included cleaning around the Children's Discovery Center every week, starting their own neighborhood watch to try to keep an eye out for vandalism or crime in the area. And this was all building off of Twinkle's model of, she's made her village an asset to the wider community. They do really massive cleanups and refurbish park bathrooms and do outreach to other houseless encampments up and down the coast. But that was the model. And what we started to see happen over time was that as people took kuleana for their area and started to contribute to something that was positive for their neighborhood, they built the confidence then to build connections with housed people around them. So whether it was the businesses in Kaka'ako and some housed residents who came out to join in with the cleanups, or in Waimanalo, folks that came from their houses to join the work, taking care of Mulivai Olena, you started to see those relationships form. And it was eye-opening that bridging that divide between houseless and housed was so critical to making new solutions possible. And so, again, the best example of that is Pu'uhonua o Waianae. They've garnered so much community support that they were able to raise money and purchase their own land. But the folks in Waimanalo, similarly, they built community in the beach park, and some of those leaders were the first to move into Auntie Blanche's kauhale and to help construct the first homes there. And the folks that were living in Kaka'ako have kept up their service work as well, and have now garnered enough community support by showing up at neighborhood board meetings and engaging other house supporters that they're also looking at a piece of land to house many of their friends who are still unhoused on the street. So that's been the latest iteration of Huialoha's work, is actually to look at making space for people. And I think the finding and making space for people is directly proportional to how much space people have in their minds and hearts for connecting with houseless folks. And the key to that is actually having houseless people at the table for events like this, at neighborhood board meetings, in boardrooms or government hearings, to have them representing themselves and sharing their stories, because that's when the walls start to come down and people can really connect and support can be built. And then you can have village solutions to homelessness, both figurative and literal village solutions to homelessness. So that's kind of overview of the substance of Huialoha's work and kind of the gaps in the system that it emerged from. And I guess the last thing I would share is that it's been a really incredible learning journey for me personally, not just from Puhonua, but from the folks in Waimanalo and Kaka'ako who are now on Sand Island. And one of the biggest lessons for me is that there's been something really healing for me and reconnecting with a village mindset and a village way of life. And that's actually a pathway to an affordable and sustainable way of thriving that's rooted in relationships and not just transactions or accumulation, And to paraphrase that famous quote from Buckminster Fuller, protest is not enough. We need to build the new model that makes the existing model obsolete, something that's more attractive to all of us. And so this work to me is not just about houselessness or homelessness. It's about making space for a way of thriving through relationships and through community versus through transaction and extraction and just accumulating for ourself or our household. And Pu'onua o Waianae is an incredible example of that. And there are others, on this call that are on their way to building that model too.
Thank you. Mahalo, James. That was all so beautifully rendered. I want to thank you also personally, because really getting to know and spend time with not just the people of Huialoha, but again, all of the other communities where you work and strive and thrive and connect with community, that has moved me and has expanded my spirit and my understanding in permanent and powerful ways. So thank you for what you do. And I love seeing you and Twinkle interact and engage in your relationship banter. You together, I think, have such a powerful vision. I'm looking forward to the book that you write together. And I would like to actually ask Twinkle to come now on camera. Twinkle Borges is the leader of Puhonua Waianae, as mentioned, a village of 250 people living currently, most of them on state land adjacent to the Waianae Boat Harbor, but there is a new site to which most of those folks in the community will move. Twinkle has organized her village into a powerful asset for the wider community, offering safety, healing, and purpose to others who have lost conventional housing. And I was last there, and there is a place where resources, supplies, clothing is organized by the Puhonua o Waianae residents and others who are not, in fact, in the village, who are not houseless, come from all over the island to come and secure supplies and to get help. And so I can attest to the power of that place as a conduit for serving everyone on our island. Puhonua conducts regular cleanups all across the Waianae coast, feeding and clothing residents of other houseless encampments, as well, and distributing back to school supplies each year to both housed and houseless families in need. In 2018, Twinkle and others led an effort to defend the village from the threat of state eviction and spent the next year and a half raising funds to purchase the land that the village could relocate to. And in 2020, Twinkle and the village completed the purchase of 20 acres in the Waianae Valley for their permanent home. And construction is now beginning there. And she is, of course, on the steering committee of Hui Aloha. So welcome, Twinkle. Thank you so much for being here. Twinkle, I would like to ask you, what are some things that you and put it to wake up, how do we wake up people? Twinkle, we're having a hard time hearing you. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure if maybe you should try taking out your earphones if can, or and unplugging. Can you speak now, Twinkle?
You have to unmute, Twinkle.
You can hear me now?
Yes, I think that's better. Mahalo,
Okay.
Twinkle.
Okay, no problem. Sorry about that. Okay, for me, what is that? Singing to wake people's mind up. For me, it's building a relationship with the people. It can be the worst day when they come to me. It can be the worst day when they come to me, or building their mana up, seeing with what kind of help, you know. For me, everybody is different, especially if that's their first day being there. I believe God, He never sent me followers, He sent me leaders. It's just waking them up and having them realize the full potential that they can be in life, you know, helping them to recover back what was lost.
Mahalo. And can I ask you, you know, how then do you help people to recover what was lost? How have you built your village into the loving community it is today?
One thing I love about our village, we have almost 250 people, different races, different areas they come from. A lot of the people that is houseless in Waianae area is from Waianae. And if you notice, a lot of the people that is houseless around the island is actually, they usually stay closer to where they call home. I have a family that is with me. She's from Micronesia. She was actually one of them who was staying in a shelter. And about 4 or 5 years ago, about 100 of them got kicked out with no solution. They came to the village. Out of the 100 of them, there's 5 of them that is left with us. The rest, we had gotten them help to get back home or to move to wherever they needed to move to, or even to help them to get Section 8. But the last 5 that I do have with us, she's so powerful. This one lady named Jaceline, always helping, very motherly to people also. But she found our place to be home, you know. Oh, sorry about that, Maya. Having a blank moment.
You're doing great.
Yeah.
What I will say is that having spent time with you, Twinkle, and having heard from others who admire you greatly, I see that you blend, um, having high expectations of people, knowing their strength, knowing their power, knowing their gift, knowing their story, with, compassion, kindness, sometimes, um, finding that space to both embrace them and push them, because you can be so strong, so tough, but also so loving and gentle. And people see that. I see how the animals in your space are thriving, how the keiki in your space are thriving. You've built a vision for schooling that is grounded in place and community, that is holistic, that looks at the whole child. And it's a beautiful vision of education. And so I really appreciate.
Maya, honestly, I never realized what I was doing was that important. Yeah, showing somebody a little love, and I didn't realize that the love took them a long way. Because I couldn't find love in my own home. I found love on the streets, and I kind of understood that when the people started coming. I didn't realize how huge and how big this houselessness is until I moved down to the Waianae area. Then I realized we had all these people out on the street, but one day I was one of those people too on the streets. Whenever anybody would come and sit down with me, I would always make sure I give them an ear, just so somebody is listening to them. You don't know where they would be at, if you're not there, or what they would be thinking. I met a lot of people who also took their lives because they couldn't just handle what life that they had in store for them. So instead of believing in themselves that we can get through this together. Always let one is always there. You just need to reach out a little bit more and ask for that help and don't be ashamed. Um, it's a huge mission we have. You know, it doesn't only bring me on the anxieties. It makes me think about solutions. It makes me think about what the next steps we need to take. Um, how to approach things, just to be accounted for, just to be accounted and be accepted to be for being someone means a whole lot. It took me years to keep my head up, because many years I kept my head down because I was houseless. Still not understanding that what I was doing was actually one big thing in showing somebody else love, in showing somebody else compassion, understanding things that people was lacking in their life because of the choices they would choose. So I'm blessed to even being there and just to be a witness for them, to help them get to the next level.
Twinkle, what are you most proud of, in terms of Pu'uhonua Waianae and what you are building, and what are you excited about?
I'm excited that we'll be able to give people a forever home. I'm excited. Today I don't have only one summa cum laude. I have two that graduated among my kids. Um, I'm more excited that I see a lot of people in our village healing today. Recognizing how they can be of use, how they can help the next person, how they can identify a situation and turn that into a solution. I'm excited for having my new captains and my overseas taking the responsibilities and helping me push what should be done. I'm excited that I have an outreach crew that actually go out and share with other houseless people and ask them to keep their head up, that it'll be okay. I just can't wait to bring everybody home. That would be the joyous part.
Yes, it will. And I'm so grateful for all of the hard work that is going into the process of building the village. And I know that everyone is very excited to join the Kahale. And I want to also, just commend you for motivating people to have a strength-based approach, to know that they are capable of more than they realize, you know, to nourish the resilience in others, which I have seen, and which excites them and me. So mahalo uncle for that work. And thank you. Thank you. And, I would like to now ask Tina Grandinetti, please, to come. Tina is on the Hawaii State Legislature staff with Rep. Amy Peruso, who's a wonderful educator. She was born and raised on Oahu and is currently a doctoral student at the RMIT University Center for Urban Research. Tina's work focuses on the production of housing and security in Hawaii and the ways that Kanaka Maoli and working class settlers are resisting displacement and creating home and belonging in Kaka'ako and Waianae. Tina also manages, as was mentioned, the Office of Representative Amy Peruso, where she is working to develop policy to strengthen tenants' rights and curb speculation in Hawaii's housing market. And Tina, thank you so much for being here and for being a strong advocate. Tina, in The Value of Hawaii 3, put out by the Center for Biographical Research, and that is, by the way, free to all. I do encourage you to read the many essays in The Value of Hawaii 3. It's available online, edited by Aiko Yamashiro, Craig Howes, Jonathan Osorio, and Noelani Goodyear Kaopua. But in The Value of Hawaii 3, Tina, you wrote eloquently about Uncle John, who is houseless, but who has a strong sense of home. And you wrote that the home we build in this pandemic's wake will not be the commodity divorced from land and life, for that divorce lies at the root of the crisis itself. Instead, home will become expansive enough to confirm Uncle John's certainty that even though he cannot pay, and no matter how much his existence is criminalized, he will never be homeless in Hawaii. So, Tina, I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit more about Uncle John and your personal journey to understanding the beautiful and bountiful, powerful and challenging stories of houselessness here in Hawaii.
Sure. So I wrote, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be a part of this, especially because Pu'uhonua, Waianae, Kapo'eo, Kaka'ako, and Hui Aloha have taught me so much about the kind of person I want to be. So I'm very honored to be included on this panel. But I wrote about Uncle John in that piece because I asked him a question. I asked him why he refers to himself as houseless instead of homeless. And this is something I'd heard from a lot of people before, because obviously home can mean a lot more than a house. But when I asked Uncle John that question, he just looked at me and he said, I will never be homeless in Hawaii. Hawaii is the place of my ancestors. I have family here. I have culture here. I have the Aina. So for me, his answer was especially powerful because it reminds us that here in Hawaii, Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiians have a claim to belonging and a claim to home that's rooted in this genealogical connection to Aina, and also in unrelinquished claims to lands that were stolen from the Hawaiian people. So even when they're deprived of a house, their belonging to Aina and their sense of home is something that can't be taken away. And that really made me reflect on how in Hawaii, we have this beautiful history and long history of Hawaiians and settlers forming pu'uhonua out of displacement and then standing to protect the Aina that gave them refuge and gave them a safe place for healing. So like we have the history of San Island or Mokawea, pu'uhonua o Waimanalo, which turned an experience of displacement into a sovereign space. Then we have the pu'uhonua at Makua, which gave rise to Malama Makua and fought to stop the US military from live fire training at Mapua. So that's not homelessness at all. That's like an incredibly deep, fierce sense of home, probably deeper than many of us experience as like when we are housed. And it's fueled some of Hawaii's most important political movements. So for me, I wrote about that story with Uncle John because it's reflective of this larger thing that I've learned from spending time in Pu'uhonua, at Pu'uhonua Waianae, and with Kapo'eo Kaka'ako, that home, like property ownership and real estate, don't get to define what home means. It means so much more than that.
Thank you, Tina, so much. And can I ask you to speak a little bit about the legislature and whether you perceive that there is a gap there between what needs to be done and what politically can be done?
Yeah, so I'm pretty new at the legislature. I've been there, I was there for the last session, so not quite a year yet. But for me, it was a huge shift because the way that people talk about home and housing at the legislature is so different from the ways that I saw it being practiced in Kaka'ako and Waianae. So I think for me, the biggest gap is that at the legislature, housing, and for a lot of us, like the way we talk about housing is first as a commodity or a driver of our economy and an asset. And when we talk about the housing crisis, we're talking always about the supply and demand of that commodity. So when we're talking about the unaffordability of housing for the middle and working class, that's framed as a supply issue. Like, we have a housing shortage, we need 65,000 more units, we have to build faster, we have to build more. But we also need to reflect on the fact that 75% of housing demand comes from low-income households, and we have illegal vacation rentals, and we have entire developments being built for like luxury investment, and we have a quarter of home purchases being made by out-of-state buyers. So when we talk only about building without being critical about how we build and what we're building and who we're building for, then it just feeds back into real estate and development interests. Not to mention that building in the way that we have is super unsustainable for the Aina and for our sense of place and our sense of community, like what James was talking about. So then the second gap is that housing is separated from homelessness. And when we talk about houselessness, that's seen as a different issue. It's more about personal failings and individual issues like drug addiction or mental illness. And for, like, not to say that those aren't real problems, but I think what that divide does is that it masks the fact that many of us who are housed are much closer than we would like to admit to being, to experiencing houselessness. And number two, that it deflects from this real question of like power and privilege, because housing isn't unaffordable in Hawaii just because we don't have enough of it. It's because people are profiting, like some people are profiting immensely off of something that's a basic human need, and then their right to profit is being prioritized over other people's right to having a home. So I think the political gap there is that I feel like our leaders, for the most part, aren't ready to start defending the right to housing over the right to profit. They're not ready to, they haven't shown that they're ready to take steps to disincentivize speculative investment or protect renters' rights. And I guess that's kind of like on us to build political will.
Well, can I ask you a little bit about whether there are any measures going through the ledge, or, you know, in terms of building that political will, are there efforts and partners that you're excited about that make you feel hopeful? You know, in terms of addressing things like the need for decriminalization, or looking at the high cost of living or affordable housing or income inequality, or, you know, the excessive burden on frontline communities, that sort of thing. Are there things that we can support that you've seen kind of coming down, other than, of course, the important work of KPOC and POW and Hui Aloha that we've already talked about, but, you know, things that are more sort of governmental?
Sure. Well, I think one thing I'm excited about is the fact that the work of Pu'uhono Waianae has started to make people realize that people who have experienced houselessness are experts on their own experience, right? Like, we don't need to turn only to policy experts or real estate lobbyists or developers for solutions. We can look to the people on the ground. So that's an important change. But then in terms of like actual policy that's being discussed, I get very excited about two kind of spheres of work. The first around disincentivizing speculation. Things like a vacant home tax, or increasing property taxes on like second homes or third homes, anything that makes it less profitable to speculate in Hawaii's housing market when so many of us, whether we're housed or houseless, are struggling. And then the second area is empowering tenants. Our office is putting together a tenants' rights package of bills, which include things like a just cause eviction measure, which means that a landlord can only evict a tenant for certain just causes, like failure to pay rent or violating your lease. And then if they want to regain possession of their unit beyond that, they'll have to help with relocation fees, for example. We're also going to introduce an anti-rent gouging measure, which would prohibit landlords from increasing rent more than 5% plus the increase in cost of living each year. And I think, you know, like stuff like that, rent regulation has been really taboo for a long time, but I feel like people are ready to have that conversation now. And then smaller things like sealing eviction records, which follow people and become a real barrier to finding housing. And then guaranteeing the right to counsel in eviction court, because we know that when you're represented in court, you have a much higher chance of getting to stay in your housing.
Mahalo, Tina. Thank you for all that you're doing. We will be paying attention, and we will be seeking opportunities to support those initiatives. And as a reminder to listeners, if you have any questions, Tina can try to answer them in the Q&A. And thank you, James, for having done so. And
Maya, you muted yourself.
oh, that happens. At any rate, thank you so much. And I'd like to now invite Lindsay Pacheco to come onto the screen. Lindsay is one of the founders of Kapoe o Kaka'ako, or KPOC, a group of houseless people who were self-organized in 2019 and began conducting weekly cleanups and other service projects in the Kaka'ako neighborhood. Before KPOC were swept in late 2019, Kapoe o Kaka'ako earned the respect of many housed neighbors, area businesses, and the neighborhood board through presence, through service, through clear communication, and KPOC became a valued voice. And KPOC leaders are now spearheading an effort to find land for a kauhale to serve as a permanent home for those who remain houseless in urban Honolulu. As of May 2020, Lindsay has been housed. She re-enrolled in college and is pursuing a degree in social work, all while continuing to provide outreach services and to those who are still houseless. As a member of both KPOC and Hui Aloha, welcome, Lindsay. Thank you for being here and for
Thank you,
sharing
Maya.
your insight and experience. Lindsay, what has been the most counterproductive or harmful, programs, processes, measures, policies to people on the street? What has been most productive? I'm sorry, what has been most counterproductive and harmful first?
First of all, thank you, Maya, for having me. I really appreciate this. This is such an honor to sit here and talk with everyone. To answer your question, the most counterproductive situation right now, I believe, is the creation of the sweeps as we know them to be, which is basically, or it was considered compassionate disruption, where basically a HPD and a city and county team of a special team would come out and basically shuffle the homeless people around. They would shuffle us from place to place, making it hard for service providers to remain consistent in providing service. There have been several occasions while I was still living in the Kaka'ako Park area, several occasions where service providers were coming out, but not on a consistent basis, because of the fact that we would get swept so many times, so often, they wouldn't know where to find us. And not all of us had phones, not all of us had, computers or technology to keep in touch. And a lot of times we don't know where their offices are, we don't get their phone numbers, we just get the commitment that they're going to come back, and then they don't. Sometimes it would be months before we would see them again.
Yeah, that's tough. And then that fractures the relationship and limits opportunities for growth. Well, on the flip side, may I ask you, what you have seen that has been most helpful to folks living on the street, and what gives you a sense of optimism?
I gotta say, this is where I give all credit to Hui Aloha, because really, if it wasn't for Hui Aloha coming to and starting to work with us in Kaka'ako when they did, I honestly, me personally, honestly wouldn't know where I'd be at today. But a lot of us have found that, starting to form a community, an organized community, where we have structure amongst ourselves, that we sat down together and agreed upon, rules that we would all follow, being that if we could, literally find a place, like Pu'uhonua or Waianae, and actually, a set place where we could safely be and just live. Hui Aloha and the amount of outreach and the weekly visits had helped us so much. It gave us a sense of being human again. It allowed us all to start realizing that we're not what media would paint us out to be, as vagrants on the side of the road, or a dirty mess. It gave us the sense of belonging and rehumanizing us once again. We're just people just trying to live. A lot of us are not out there by choice, as I can only speak for myself and my situation. Like, I ended up out on the street personally because I had lost my job due to a lack of proper childcare. I couldn't go to work because I couldn't find somebody, responsible enough to take care of my 2-month-old baby at the time. So I lost my job, which in turn I lost my home. And it wasn't my choice to lose my home. I just couldn't afford it anymore. And it was, what do I do? What do I do? And basically that's how I ended up on the street. And for a great time being, I would feel this small. I mean, literally like an inch tall is how I felt at first. But when I started, when I found Kaka'ako, when I found a place there, and the sense of belonging, the sense of love, and then Hui Aloha just helped enhance that even more by keeping us connected, and with a little bit of guidance and a little bit of advice and inspiration here and there, we literally grew. And even till today, I'm housed now, like as you shared, I'm housed now, but I know that, Kaka'ako, Kapo'eo Kaka'ako has literally become my ohana. You know, we may not be blood related, but they're still my family. And I always like to quote Lilo and Stitch, you know, the famous saying, ohana is family. You know, family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. And I stand by that today because, and that's why I do what I do. You know, even though I'm housed, all of them, we all deserve to be housed. You know, everybody, anybody, no matter who you are, where you're from, nobody deserves to live out on the street. Even if you suffer from mental health issues or drug addiction, you know, I'm a perfect example. I was not clean and sober when I got my housing, but in doing so, in getting my housing, I have managed to gain sobriety now. I've been going on 7 months clean and sober now, you know, and back in school, and it has been a huge change. And that sense of community, that sense of belonging is huge, and in, you know, healing someone from the inside out.
Absolutely. Incredibly powerful, healing someone from the inside out. So Lindsay, what are your goals now that you are healing and helping others to heal for the Kaka'ako community, for yourself, beyond the degree? And you know, what are your hopes for those who remain on the street and are still very much in need of healing?
My current hopes is to find a place for everyone to call home, a safe place where they can just be and gain the stability that they need in their life to flourish, to thrive, to do the same healing process as I've been able to slowly go through myself, you know, and just be human again. You know, right now with COVID and this pandemic and, you know, the lack of shelter space, because we here in Hawaii, we have a lot of homeless shelters, you know, given that, but there's not enough space. There's more homeless people out on the street than space that's available in the shelters. So my hope, my goal, and my dream is for them to have a safe place. And that's where we, as James had mentioned earlier, KPOK has been blessed with a piece of land that we're working on getting transferred over from state to city, to where we can actually do something very similar to Auntie Twinkle's village with Pu'uhonua Waianae, and create a home, a place for everyone to just safely be, and, you know, start building that foundation of stability that they need in their life in order to move forward. Because, you know, talking to everyone and getting to know everyone as we have been, you realize that so many people have so many hidden skill sets that we would never know about being homeless out on the street, because we don't need to use those skills. Whereas in our in a village, they have the potential to do that, to be themselves, to, you know, do what they do best, and do what they love, and share that part with everybody, you know.
Thank you. Mahalo, Lindsay. You know, keep up all of your good work. And I know how hard you are working in the service of that vision. And you know, we are proud of all that you have accomplished, and the strength and resilience that you have demonstrated and that you inspire in others. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd now like to invite Blanche Mcmillan to come onto screen. Blanche has been caring for others her whole life. She professionally performed acupuncture, shiatsu, and lomi, particularly on sickly children. Over the years, she and her husband, Willie, raised their 3 children, adding 5 adopted children to the family, and 20 foster children that the couple has cared for over the years. For 9 years, Blanche served as the outreach coordinator for the St. George Food Bank in Waimanalo, helping to feed and clothe those in need. And she wondered about a better and more permanent solution. She had a vision, as she says, of the plentiful life of her ancestors. And once the pandemic threatened the lives of those who were most vulnerable and least able to protect themselves, Blanche heard a call to bring the houseless of Waimanalo Beach to a safer place on the land directly behind her family home. So, gathering the support of her local Waimanalo community, as well as many other well-wishers, she managed to get a number of tiny houses built or donated to open the Kauhale Hui Mahiai Aina in April of 2020. HMA is now a haven of protection. Residents help to create and tend a growing bountiful garden and aquaponics system. They prepare food together, clean, provide security, and run a food bank and give to the rest of the community as well. Thank you and welcome, Blanche. Blanche, I would, are you there? Hi, okay, well, I'll just ask the question, and Blanche, Blanche, can you tell us about your vision and the creation of Hui Mahi Aina and what you feel are the best models of housing moving forward? The best models of housing or kauhale? Okay, so I think that Blanche was here earlier, however, does not seem to be here now. So I am going to just hope that she can return to us. And if she does, I will ask her the questions intended for her. In the meantime, I'd like to invite Jesse Freddie Francis of We Are Oceania and Peace to please join us. Introduce Jesse. Jesse is the community resource specialist at We Are Oceania. Working at WOW at We Are Oceania has reminded Jesse of his high school motto, which is to be men and women for others. Serving others has inspired and given him the opportunity to live up to the vision of what is possible in being more humane, working with members of his community who have been struggling and in need of assistance, especially during the pandemic, has given him a sense of purpose. This has made him realize not only what is needed for community during this pandemic, but also what is needed for our beloved community in the long run. We Are Oceania has motivated Jesse to do and be part of something that will benefit the community entire, not just the Oceania community, but community engagement through We Are Oceania and Peace has also made him feel part of someone's family and given him the mandate of inspiring others in his age demographic to change their feelings of empowerment, to engage youth. And also he works to inspire all of us to build a strength-based image of the wonderful Micronesian communities living here in Hawaii. And who have been subject to numerous stereotypes. So Jesse, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. As was mentioned, the pandemic has had an intense impact on your community living here in Hawaii and has curtailed many of the wraparound services offered to those in need. What have you and We Are Oceania and Peace been doing during the pandemic?
Thank you. I would first of all like to thank you for this opportunity to be part of this panel and be among these wonderful leaders who have spoken before me and those. What we have done at We Are Oceania, we've been securing or enrolling people for health insurance, which is very critical at this time, given that the pandemic is getting even more and more serious each day. Another thing that we've been doing is delivering food to people who are in quarantine and isolation. We do that all over Oahu. We also ship PPEs or cleaning supplies that are needed in the neighbor islands. And we also distribute food every Friday. Food is available to everyone who is willing to come and get food. If we have leftovers, we go out and look for those that have no way of coming to us, especially those houseless communities in our area. We go out as far as Sand Island, just trying to help people out. And for me, that honestly has a lot of, sometimes make me want to cry, because seeing like the joy and reaction on people's faces, it's priceless.
Thank you, Jesse, for doing that, for wanting to do that, and for inspiring that in others. What do you think that we should be doing, especially those of us who, maybe want to do more to help and learn? What should we be doing as folks are still coping with the pandemic to connect more broadly with the Micronesian community here, with the Kofa community?
We would like if we work together, people with the same goal, or organizations with the same goal, come together and work as one to help overcome those obstacles that line the way. Be collaborative with one another and supportive. Where we come from, the thing that we value the most is family. And don't matter like how poor you are or how rich you are, back home there is no such thing as houseless people. You know, people are out on the streets or being poor, but then at the end, they have that home because family is so important to us that it's, you know, we're out there. It's our people. We got to be out there and helping one another. And I think with anything that's an issue or come across any issue or obstacles, family is always the key. And for us people who are capable of doing so, helping others, I would like to see us working together and helping those who are lacking that support or lacking that sense of family, you know, being there for them. And as many of the other speakers also mentioned, family is always key to everything. And I believe it's also one of the biggest thing we can do to overcome any obstacle, honestly.
Absolutely. And so changing that mindset to see one another as family is an important step. And every family, every good ohana, and it has young people who are poised to rise up, to step into their beauty and their power. And certainly many Kofa families and Micronesian families have such powerful and beautiful young people. I would love to ask you, how can you inspire youth activism and advocacy and servant leadership? And how do you do that? How do you work to do that? What can we do? What should we be doing to encourage that? And what do young people need from the rest of us, do you think?
I think the young people like myself need to go out more into the community and just, bond with people out there. And also one thing is in our culture, the Kofa culture, or people of Micronesia, we value the old elders as people to look up to because they have that wisdom. And it's very different out here where it's like you turn 18, you move out of your house, and but us, as we grow older, it's our responsibility to take care of our parents. And with that, a lot of wisdom is passed down to us from the elders, from the older generations. And I believe that's one thing that the younger generation needs to do, needs to bond with the older elders and be there for them in order for that wisdom to be passed down for generations. And more so, we need to advocate for those people who are often forgotten. For example, like as the pandemic continues to spread and schools being back in session, a lot of our people are often forgotten. Like students go to school, bring back the disease into their household, and they can't go to school because they remain in isolation and quarantine. And one of the biggest issues is that it's like they're forgotten. There's no other options for them to continue their learning. And I believe that is one thing we need to advocate about. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate you. You are such a powerful and wonderful model of servant leadership, and you are helping us to navigate through tough times, and we really appreciate you, your energy and your thoughtfulness and your presence in our community. Thank you. And I'd like to ask Blanche to return. Blanche, I introduced you, but then we weren't able to hear from you. So glad
Yes.
you're here. Mahalo, mahalo for being here. And Blanche, I was asking as your first question, if you could tell us more about your vision and the creation of Hui Mahi Aina and what you feel is the best model for Kauhale, and what are the components of your village that that you think are strong and important?
Well, I come from a family of 17, 9 sisters and 8 brothers. My father and mother is very strong Christian, and they believe in the Lord. So my mother and father depended on the Lord. Whatever we do, we ask and we receive. So then I started to watch my dad and mom, what they were. They were very powerful people. My ancestors were very powerful. And so we decided that, watching them, there were a lot of homeless out there. And I said to myself, it was time for me to do something about it. And that's exactly what I did during the pandemic time. I decided that it was time for them to come home because this land belongs to them. And in God's eyes, it is their land. And then we decided that it was time for us to continue to take care of those who was in need. So I decided that we gave what my children, my husband and I, what we really gave our people here, our homeless people, was love and family, one big family. We treat them as our own family. This is the most important thing. When you have this homeless people, they lost all the love when they grew up. They lost everything. So we had to show them how to love one another as God loves us. And we wanted to show them what his family is all about. And that's what my family has showed them, and told them every night, good night, we love you. And then the next day we do our thing. And what we normally do, what I really wanted to bring back was God into their life again. And that's what we did. We brought the churches here. We have 15 different churches that comes here to show them the love again, the bond with God again. And then what we did, we made we have 5 leaders here. 5 leaders are responsible for the kitchen, the bathrooms, their security, their time for feed each other. They feed the whole community here. And one thing I looked at them today, they are not the same person that they were here with the first time. Today, they found themselves. They finally love themselves. And this is what we all need to know, that we are the ones that needs to help those that are homeless, because they can never be homeless unless you show them that you respect them and they respect you.
Thank you, Blanche.
Yeah.
I really appreciate how much of the community shows up for your community days. And I watched your garden grow so much with all of the different hands working together to plant. And I saw a lot of change happening pretty quickly. How have you gotten the support of the community and brought housed and unhoused together to share that space? How have you managed to get such support and such participation?
Prayer. The most important thing I did, I asked everyone on the news and everything, pray for us, be there for us. And things just appeared. We started to have people donating. We have a special brother to me. He is my special person who brought in the homes first. There was 9 homes. Then we have other homes coming in. Now today we have 21 homes. We have 62 people. We have 23 children. Today we have Hardware Hawaii wants to donate lumbers, materials, and we're having them coming in today and dropping off things. And our people is the one that builds the home with a construction person who has a license. Our people is so happy because they are working on the land. Today we harvest our color place today in our garden. We made 110 lau out of the harvest that we did already. And we made stuluau. We made palasami. We have all the vegetables you can think of that you can make soup out of it. You can cook with it. It's just from April to now, our garden is huge. Now today we feed everyone here with our garden. Yes.
Well, I love that you cook together, that you eat together, you share story, and I am incredibly grateful for your optimism. You make, again, the seemingly impossible possible, and you just sort of get things done. And as you pointed out, it is the unhoused community, the unsheltered, once unsheltered folks who are consulted, who are building the homes together with the construction person. That participation, I think, is really necessary and gives people a sense of possibility and of optimism. In closing, I'd like to ask, what have you learned by working directly with the community about what is necessary for any good solution around houselessness? What have you learned from the unhoused folks who are now part of your ohana and your kauhale?
Well, what I'm doing right now, actually, in the community, I'm everything. I do food bank. I'm an agency with the Food Bank of Hawaii. I was a coordinator, of course, for George for 10 years. And now I was on the board, neighborhood board before. Then I'm a vice president for the Waimanalo Hawaiian Homes Association. I'm a director for the Civic Club. So all the community knows me very well. And the community, when they need help, I'm always there to help them. Auntie Blanche, always there. When you see news or whatever, but I don't want to be on the news. I want to just be there to help
I'm Auntie
Oh,
Blanche.
yes.
Oh, sorry, you cut out and we lost
Oh.
the end of what you just said.
Oh, okay. Actually, what I'm saying is that I've been helping a lot of people in the community whenever they need help. But what I do with my people here, I teach them how to give back. I make them do the food bank. When we have the large food bank, they're there to help me to serve the people when they come in for their food. They help me with everything what I do, clean the farm. Whenever people needs cleaning in the beach area, we're there to help. When like this now, we have the little girl who lost. We're there to give them food, everything that they need. There, you see, we're everywhere. We're helping everyone in the community. They know that Blanche and her people is something special. And we came through a long way. Today, we are well known in Waimanalo. Yes.
Well, thank you for your work in Waimanalo and for your passion and your commitment and for inspiring optimism in all of us. And again, for those of you who are here, if you would like to ask questions of James, of Twinkle, of Tina, of Jesse, or of Blanche, please by all means add your questions, and we will try to answer them in the remaining time. And
Mahalo, mahalo,
hello to you, Blanche.
mahalo.
Final speaker is Ronette Kawakami of the William S. Richardson School of Law, who co-sponsors this evening event. Ronette is the Associate Dean of Student Services at the Richardson School of Law. She served as a legislative liaison and for many years and served a total of 26 years with the State Office of the Public Defender. Outside the legal community, she was a volunteer with a cow wagon that distributed food for the houseless at A'ala Park in the 90s. She also volunteers at St. Elizabeth's Saturday morning breakfast for houseless community members. Welcome, Ronette. Thank you for being here.
Aloha, thank you, Maya. Aloha, mai kako, everyone. And thank you for having me to share just a few words. I want to thank all the speakers, so amazing. And I'm just stunned in a good way at all the good works that everyone is doing. I'm so grateful for all of everything that all of you are doing. I just have a few things to say. And I think that first of all, I'm going to say is I'm not an academician. I'm not an academic. I came from practice, being a public defender for 26 years. And I work now at the law school as more of an administrator and someone who helps the students. So that being said, I did take a look at the law behind, houselessness and homelessness. And, and now I'm the boring person here, right? I'm going to talk about law a little bit. And the main case that, if anyone needs to know, is a case called Martin versus Boise, City of Boise. And it's a case that came out of the Ninth Circuit. And basically, it's a case that says that the Eighth Amendment, which is weird because you don't usually think of the Eighth Amendment as something involving homelessness or houselessness, is that the Eighth Amendment prohibits, cruel and unusual punishment, right? And what that case says is that it is cruel and unusual to punish someone who is houseless. And it's wrong. It's constitutionally wrong. And so every so often, these judges get pretty eloquent. And one thing this is a quote from the case, and I'm going to paraphrase it to a certain extent. And what they say in Martin versus Boise is that sitting and lying and resting and sleeping is a universal and unavoidable consequence of being human. So Lindsay, you're human, you're always human, you're human at every point in your life. All of you, everyone who has houses, they're all human at every single point in their lives. And it doesn't matter whether you have an addiction, or it doesn't matter if you fail to pay your rent, you're still human. We are all human. And the court recognizes this. And we don't need the court to tell us that, right? Why? Why do we need a court to tell us that? But what the court did in that case is they're telling the powers that be that this needs to be fixed. this is not just a constitutional violation. It's something that needs to be fixed. You can't just go keep on finding out ways to write better laws to continue making houselessness a crime. That's not the point here. The point is to fix the issue or fix the problem. I think that, listening to what everyone said today, it was just amazing. I think that, when you talk about, Lindsay talked about the sweeps as being these compassionate sweeps or ways to shake things up or move people around. I think that's like, and of course, that's from their perspective, right? The truth of the matter is it's a way to dehumanize. And like I said, we are just being human. People are just being human. And by doing a sweep, it's dehumanizing you. It's really difficult to be a person in modern society. You have to have ID, you have to have your all these identification cards, you need to have a bus pass, and all of that gets lost when you're being moved, right? And that's not something that's dehumanizing, it's not something good. I think that what I really loved about what everyone's saying today, and I think that one of the questions that I thought that Maya might be asking me today was, how is it, what's important here? What is important here is that everything all of you said multiple times, and I wrote it down in my notes. Loving community. Twinkle, you said those words. Someone said showing love. Another person said dignity and compassion. And that's what's most important. And that's what gets people to really care. It's not enough for me to go cow wagon and feed people at Ala Park. That doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't get me anywhere if I go feed people over at the church. That's nice. That's good. And I feel like at that point in time when I'm giving someone breakfast, that I'm treating them as a human being and I'm reminding them, look, you're human. I think that things like what James has done, what Twinkle has done, what Lindsay is doing, what Tina is doing, with all of you, Blanche, just amazing. That's that step forward. I think I missed someone. Sorry, Jesse, you too. I think that that's a step forward of actually getting something not done, not just feeding people, but going beyond that and helping them get to the place where they need to be. I think one of the things that's important about Hawaii, and I think Tina talked about this a lot, is that we have something to fall back on in Hawaii. And that's that base is that we can look to, that can return to, and we can learn from, that we can always build on, is our Native Hawaiian culture. Because that's always there. And it's like how Tina said that Uncle John is never homeless because he always has his home Hawaii. He's always connected to that. Someone from the Mauna told me this, and I can't remember his name right this minute, but that we are, through our piko, through our navel, connected to the land. And because of that, we have that love for it always. And we always have that connection. So not super eloquent, that's not super legal, but that's what I have to say for today. And thank you so much for letting me be a part of this conversation.
Thank you, Renette. And I appreciate that your voice is one that upholds and supports connection and compassion. Even though you are coming from a legal space, there's no reason why our policies, our top-down solutions, and our legal solutions cannot be, as you said, eloquent or elegant and humane, and to bring this approach that is about honoring each other's experiences, cultures, communities, languages, and that shapes legal solutions in a way that brings the flesh and blood back to the work of law and policy is what we want to see happen and encourage. So everyone today has shared stories, and my hope is that those stories are impactful in every space in our community, that those stories enable a sense of agency and participation that may not seem obvious, but is necessary if we are going to make meaningful progress. All of us have to choose to participate, and we have an impact, whether that impact is benevolent, positive, helpful, or harmful. Let us choose what we know to be helpful solutions, and let us enable all of the solutions put forth today to thrive and be duplicated and scaffolded and shared in other spaces. We have a lot of people watching today, and a lot of others who I hope will watch the recording and hear from all of you. And it's imperative that everyone who is listening think about ways to shift mindsets and to ensure that we are enabling loving solutions and not looking at the issue of houselessness as a problem narrowly, but seeing that all of us can learn a great deal about community, building home, and finding connection through these stories, and that the houseless community is a beautiful asset for all of us, is something that is abundantly clear. I thank you so much, all of you, for speaking to us today, and for ensuring that we don't support draconian measures or temporary solutions, but find sustainable ways to build loving relationships and community. I want to extend my thanks to all of you for your courage, compassion, your conviction, your wisdom. And I want to thank everyone tuning in for listening, for your questions, many of which were excellent, and your comments. I'm sorry if we weren't able to get to all of them, but let's keep in conversation addressing Hawaii's housing crisis, and requires, for instance, so many groups and organizations working together in different ways, and individuals. So let's bring all of our hands together. And putting together a program today also involved a lot of people. So I would like to thank Robert and Jose and Carol, to thank the UH Better Tomorrow Speaker Series and its partners, the Hawaii Community Foundation and Kamehameha Schools, for helping us put this conversation together. I want to thank, of course, my community at the Spark Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and the community at the William S. Richardson School of Law for serving as our main sponsors. Thank you to Seeds of Peace and other co-sponsors. We will have this program edited and posted on YouTube and Facebook soon. And we look forward to seeing you at our next conversation, or perhaps out in the community and on the Aina. In the meantime, thank you so much. And I will leave the Q&A open for the next couple of minutes for any who want to offer any closing comments there, or commitments. And again, mahalo.